What's up, people? Tried to make a video the other day that didn't turn out too well. I was talking about the great serpent, the Comet, and anyways, I was half asleep and stumbling over with some of my words, so I wanted to try this again. So I'm just going to tell a quick history story and just my perspective of things, see what other people think maybe. So imagine, let's go back about 13,000 years ago. There was obviously cultures popping up around the world 13,000 years ago that were somewhat sophisticated because they found ancient megalithic structures, and but there was also lots of hunters and gatherers and people still living off the land. And so let's say, I think it was about 12,900 years ago, this comet comes in, and at the time in North America there was massive ice sheets, and this comet is, a lot of stories call it the great serpent in the sky, this great serpent, and I would imagine they would have seen this comet's trail coming in as it approached our atmosphere. And I believe that this is the impact that caused a massive impact on humanity. Perhaps at that time the earth was fertile in the places that we lived. I mean, the Sahara Desert would have still been somewhat fertile. So there would have been people just living in these tropical places, and agriculture wouldn't be as essential. I think people were living in these electromagnetic zones called induction zones, where things were extremely fertile, these little pockets of Eden where there was plenty of fruits and vegetables and everything we needed to thrive. Early shamans had a way of detecting these places. But this comet comes in and changes the course of humanity. And this is kind of my perspective. I've been studying history for years. It's one of my favorite topics. This great serpent comes in, this comet in the sky, and it impacts or explodes somewhere around Alberta, Canada. There's trace elements of iridium embedded into mammoth bones and saber-toothed tigers and all these different animals who happened to go extinct right around that time. They found all these sloths and all these stuff blasted over in one direction with still cud in their mouth from chewing grass. And I believe that's how the Great Plains were developed, when that we had this massive runoff of water that carved out, if you ever look through Utah and some of those places where you see rocks stacked up on top of one another, where it looks like water erosion happened rapidly, and then you consider that it left behind the Great Lakes, and it carved out the Mississippi River Delta, and it deposited a lot of that water down into the Gulf of Mexico, which carried it out into the Atlantic and ultimately changed the weather. And we went into this period called the Young Drier period, which occurred slightly after that. Maybe it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and the sea levels rose all around the planet. So obviously any civilizations that were in North America and down into Mexico were completely wiped out. That's why we don't find a lot of megalithic structures in North America, partially because it was covered in ice sheets, but maybe there wasn't a lot of activity up there. Not until we get down to the Yucatan Peninsula and into South America do we see later developments after the fact. So this, on this side of the planet, it was devastating. I think it set everything back drastically. And this is why most all of the domesticated animals and everything, except for the llama, came from the Eurasian mountains and the Caucasian mountain ranges where there were nomadic tribes people. But what happened during the Young Drier period was it put the planet into a 1,300-year mini ice age, basically. And so now we're going back, 11 to 10,000 years. And there was a genetic mutation that happened to humanity, and also some of the most sophisticated colony-type civilizations we found had gone underground. And places like Göbekli Tepe and Daran Khufu. And you have to think that perhaps this lack of sunlight could have caused the genetic mutation that they discovered that happened about 10,000 years ago. They say that all blue-eyed people are all related to this one source that happened from about 10,000 years ago. And if you think 1,300 years of an ice age, you'd have people living underground in places like Göbekli Tepe and Derinkufu, which can house 10,000, 20,000 people. And some of the cultures call these underground civilizations arcs. When you look in Göbekli Tepe, there's pictures carved into the stone pillars there that represent astrological signs, which part of these legends come from the Zoroastrians, where we get the zodiac from. And but I also look at a lot of those pictures, and I see geese, and I see birds, and I see wild boar, which were domesticated into pigs, and I see bulls, which were domesticated into cows, and I see animals that may have been taken in for shelter that eventually got domesticated. I'll give you an example. The Spanish brought over pigs, domesticated pigs, with little pink things. And then they got free over here, and eventually they populated North America, and they became, after a few generations of being out in the wild, they grew tusks, and they got real big and hairy, and they turned into wild boars. So they estimate that Göbekli Tepe is about 12,000 years old, which just happens to line up. And considering they brought all these animals in, and they started living in decompartmentalized lifestyle where everybody had particular jobs and duties. And then as the thaw melted out, these people kind of started coming out. And you'd imagine when this devastation happened, maybe along the equator, there were some cultures that survived in the jungles and in pockets of areas that were so habitable. And they kept the melatonin or melanin in their eyes and their skin. And it's natural that people that have this stuff in their skin are protected from the sunlight and can see a little bit better in the sun, whereas blonde-haired, blue-eyed people have issues. We produce vitamin D rapidly, but we have problems filtering the sunlight, and we also get skin cancer quickly and such. So perhaps it was from living underground for many generations that there was this DNA change that occurred. And as we started kind of coming up from the ground and mingling with all these different cultures that got left behind, caused all kinds of issues. It's something to think about. When you look at the Hindu culture and the whole caste system over there, and how you compare priestly class to the scientific class, the guardians of knowledge, and the lighter the skin, the higher up in the priest class you were, and the darker the skin you got down to the lower classes. And even Admiral Byrd and Hitler's obsessions with the inner earth, and Hitler's obsession with the Aryan race or the Caucasian race from the Caucasus Mountains, the mountains of Turkey, where Göbekli Tepe was. It makes you think, these people that went underground and took shelter prior to this cataclysmic event that would have probably knocked the earth off. I mean, just that the earthquake in Fukushima or in Japan shook the earth off its axis a little bit. Imagine a comet that size coming in and erupting. It would have tilted the earth considerably, which could throw off all of our calculations when we look at our our calendar system and stuff, and trying to go back and date things can make things confusing. So, considering all the domesticated animals come up out of these places, all except for in South America, which later generations domesticated the llama. They didn't even have the wheel down there, the Mayans and the Aztecs and stuff, but they had the llamas down in South America. It makes you think, is it a possibility? Even the word Caucasian comes from the Caucasus Mountains. So, you can imagine, when I study history too, and I look at the Roman papacy, they used to go out and take slaves, and anytime they found these blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, they would kind of educate them and put them to the side and such, give them special treatment. And then when you think about the Roman Catholic Church and its support with what Hitler was doing and everything, I remember those Nazis, Nazarenes, they wore on their belts Gott mit uns, which means God is with us, and they had the support of the Catholic Church. And they were trying to go for fascism, which is basically when the corporations and the church run everything, and the suppression of the middle class, which is the same thing that happened in the Dark Ages when the papacy ruled before the Freemasons and the Protestants kind of started developing the middle class and such. Anyways, I got kind of off topic there, but I've been studying all that stuff recently, and I just thought it was all fascinating, and perhaps, it's all tied together. I don't know, my cigarette's about out, but have a wonderful day, people. I'd be curious to know what any of you guys think about any of that stuff, so have a great day. Be blessed. We're all one, though. Remember that. We all came from one. So even if there was a cataclysmic event that caused some DNA change in some people, and maybe those people kept certain prior knowledge sacred and kept it to themselves. And you got to think that when you live in a colony, you usually have a queen or this hierarchical, not necessarily a democratic society, but a hierarchical kind of society. And when you look at these, like in the Hindu caste system in the colony, the royalties were called blue bloods. And blue bloods were basically people with pale skin, because you could see their veins, and you could see blue blood running through their veins. That's where that name came from. So it kind of makes you think. And then you see the first infrastructures, some of the oldest infrastructures built after the thaw, where you go to like Malta, and then you have the Knights of Malta and the secret societies and stuff that rule a good population of the world. But anyways, I know that's some kind of conspiracy stuff, and I'm linking a bunch of stuff together, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, but have a great day. Be blessed, people. Take care.